Hello and welcome to Ditching Hourly. I'm Jonathan Stark and I'm rejoined by special guest JJ Peterson. JJ, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back. I'm excited to be here.
So today we are going to talk about how to be yourself and still succeed as a business owner. But first, JJ, could you let folks know what you're up to these days?
Yeah, so a lot of people who may have been following me or not over the past decade, I was working with, well, still am working with StoryBrand. We help companies clarify their message using story framework and movie theory, so they can communicate better with their audiences and tell great stories. So for a long time, I was the head of StoryBrand, and I'm still there. I've kind of moved into a role called professor in residence, where I still do teaching, speaking, write curriculum, kind of create the courses. But I've also now am an entrepreneur and a solopreneur where
Cool.
I've started my own agency called Conscious Brand Agency. I do some of the same things. And then also started a new podcast called Badass Softie. So that's kind of what I'm up to now.
Yeah, that's a perfect jumping off point. So the sort of juxtaposition of Badass Softie, what's the premise behind that?
Well, if I was boiling it down to one word, one sentence, it's really, I think sensitive professionals can succeed. It's kind of like an idea because, I would consider myself a fairly sensitive person and yet also have accomplished some pretty big things I never thought I was going to accomplish in the world. Having a best-selling book and working with huge companies like Microsoft and the US Olympic Committee and Certified Angus Beef and places I would never have said, "Oh, I belong here." Like there are all these huge places. And I teach in the Vanderbilt Masters of Marketing program. Like I literally am a professor at Vanderbilt, which kind of blows my mind. I've done these huge things I never thought I would have been able to do in my life. And yet, a lot of times when I showed up to those spaces, like whether it was a networking event or with a big company or, at events where like working with Microsoft, I showed up and there was a certain way that leadership looked that I always felt like I had to step into.
Mm.
I had to kind of get a little bit louder and puff up my chest and be more aggressive. And I can do those things. The hard part, I think, truthfully, was for me is I know how to do those things, and I don't like myself, and I don't like doing those things. And
Right.
so I know how to win by the rules of this leadership game that's been put out there, and yet I never felt like that really was who I am. And so I think the past, say 5 years really has been me trying to figure out how do you be somebody who is unapologetically driven, like wants to make money, wants to make a difference in the world, wants to be best in class. I want to be top in class.
Mhm.
However, I don't want to lose my soul as I do it. And so that's really what Badass Softie is. And it came out of this idea. So if you've heard me talk before about StoryBrand, is that in story, there are really four primary characters in any story: the victim, the villain, the hero, and the guide. Those, like any good story, those four characters exist, and they exist in stories because they exist in us.
Mhm.
Each one of us plays those characters at different points, sometimes in the same day.
Mhm.
Now, how it works is the victim, something happens to a character. And if they stay a victim in the story, the only reason they exist in the story, truthfully, through the whole story, is to make the villain look bad and the hero look good. Great stories are not written about victims because they just stay victims. They're there to be the muse for the other two characters.
Mm.
However, that victim, if they are the main character, that victim then comes to a crossroads and actually has a choice. So something negative has happened to them. They either get to stay a victim, which really just means they suck the energy from everybody else and don't do anything,
Mhm.
or they can choose to become a villain and revenge the pain, or they can become the hero and they can redeem the pain. So interesting thing in stories is heroes and villains often have a similar backstory of pain. You will see often in villains a scar on their face to represent like they went through something,
Right.
but they try to revenge it, and heroes try to redeem it. And that's how kind of the story moves forward. And the hero ultimately overcomes their past, overcomes their pain, and becomes a new champion. Along the way, that hero, in order to move forward, meets the fourth character, which is a guide. So there's somebody who often comes along to help the hero win. This is Yoda. This is Obi-Wan Kenobi. This is Dumbledore, Aslan. Like any movie has kind of the older, wiser person who comes along to help the hero win. So those are the four characters. Now, interesting thing to me about when I study story about the guide, the story is not about the guide, but the guide is actually the most powerful, the strongest character in the story.
Mm.
They've already won the day, and their job is to help other people win. So they just show up. Like the story is about, like if you're thinking Star Wars, the story is about Luke Skywalker. It's not about Obi-Wan Kenobi or Yoda, but they're the strongest characters, and their job is to show up to help the hero win. The way that when you study story, you realize the way that a guide shows up in a story is with two things, two characteristics, empathy and authority. So they show up with an understanding of the hero's pain and struggle because they've been there before. They know what they've been through, but authority, they've already won the day. So they don't have to prove anything. So the strongest characters in the story are not the hero. Heroes are up and down. They're all over the place. They doubt themselves. The strongest characters are the guides, and the guides show up to help other people win. And the way they show up is with empathy and authority. So now getting back to your original question, after I
oh, that's good. That's good context.
is where this whole Badass Softie side came out of. Is I genuinely believe that the best, strongest characters in stories are the people who show up to help other people win, and they do it with empathy and authority. If you show up just with authority and you're loud and you're aggressive and you're over the top, you actually lose trust pretty quick. And people actually see that as weakness, right? If I show up and you and I are talking, even in a networking situation, and I start going down all my list of accomplishments only, and that are about me, not about you, or have to do with anything we're talking about.
Right.
You're like, wow, this guy's really insecure.
Right.
But if I also show up and just, a lot of people are using the phrase right now, toxic empathy. If I just show up with only empathy and it's all hugs and we're just going to not get anything done, I don't think that's a service for people either. And so what I've really been learning over these past few years is how to move from one, trying never to live in a victim mindset, because a victim in a story will never actually write a good story. I try not to be a villain, even though there's moments that I do cause pain. When pain has been caused to me, I try to cause pain for others. And I try to lean into the hero side where I actually move myself forward and try to redeem some things. And then ultimately I try to live in that guide space. Where it's like, how do I live in the space as a strong character with a lot of empathy who shows up to help other people win?
Okay. So sounds like you're suggesting it's sort of a balance between aggressive kind of authority on the one hand and then toxic empathy on the other hand, and like finding a balance between those two things that is useful to the people you're trying to help.
Yeah. I think like a lot of times that toxic side is you feel like, oh, I need to be like somebody else. Like I need to be aggressive, or I need to be strong, or I need to be more caring and all this stuff. And I think both of those things can be true. I've learned so much from both sides. I'm on the board of multiple nonprofits who like are all heart and passion. And I've learned so much and been challenged by that. And I've been around people who are billionaires and changing the world. And I've been challenged by that. But I felt like for me, it's like, I don't know that I want to live in either of those spaces exclusively. I want to bring the best of both. And one of the examples I give just for when I'm talking with people is in trying to lean into that guide space is like, imagine if I go to a gym and I want to lose 30 pounds, and I say to a trainer, hey, I'm here to lose 30 pounds. And that trainer goes, me too. Not my trainer, right?
Right.
I'm not going to pay a friend hundreds of dollars to just work out with me and me help them.
Mm.
So that's a lot of empathy. But if I also walk into that gym and I say I'm here to lose 30 pounds, and a trainer lifts up their shirt and shows me their six pack and goes, well, you just got to quit being lazy, fatty. Probably not
Yeah.
my trainer either.
Right.
If I go in and that trainer says, hey, I get it. I used to be 30 pounds overweight too, but I've also created a program that's helped about 100 other people take off the weight and keep it off. And by the way, I'll let you eat ice cream. My trainer, right? And that's that combo of like, I get you, but I also got you. And without being arrogant, but showing that I'm there to show up for you and help you win.
Okay, so that really resonates with me and probably a lot of the people who do coaching that are listening, where there's a balance between a drill sergeant and cheerleader, or drill sergeant and a psychiatrist or something, like a social worker almost, that you don't, it's just not effective to live in one or the other. I suppose it all comes down to fit, and maybe there is somebody out there that needs a David Goggins type to just like yell at them and throw them in the ice water or whatever. And maybe they're maybe that is a good fit for somebody. But yeah, that's interesting, because the balance between like where you sit in the balance, because I know other coaches who, when someone comes to me and says, oh, this, maybe we should talk about coaching. There are people that I'm like, you know what, I could help you, but someone else is going to be a better fit because they're more on the empathetic side than I am. I'm probably leaning toward the whatever the mean side is, the like bad authority side. Drill sergeant, I'm a little bit more on the drill sergeant side. And so when I sense that somebody is going to need a lot of more of the soft, skilly, touchy-feely stuff, I'm like, I might not be. I'm a little impatient. I might not be the greatest fit. So do you see it? Do you see like maybe that as your particular combination as almost a differentiator? How would you sort of communicate where you are on that spectrum, or anyone listening is on that spectrum in their marketing? Because that seems like a very tough thing to get across. I guess it's just kind of like personal brand, right?
A little bit, yeah. So let me just let's play a little here. So for you, what do you feel like in your past, like what did you experience or go through that kind of helped you shift? And I don't like, not in a bad way, but helped you shift to being more like, when you've realized you actually get more results when you are a little bit more like, no, let's get crap done versus like, let's hug.
Yeah.
What was it like about your past, that way you were treated or the way you've worked with other clients, that kind of led you to that conclusion?
It's probably, to be honest, it's probably mostly having kids.
Yeah.
But also just learning. I got sort of sucked into coaching where I was doing more traditional consulting, straight up consulting for like Fortune 500 companies. But then people who I used to be colleagues with in my previous life were like, how are you running this business? Like, we don't understand. You like stopped billing hourly and you seem to be doing really well. And so people were just paying me to like help them kind of transform their business out of hourly billing. And so I didn't know what I was like, well, just do this, like do this, and do this, like done. And that didn't work. So I'm like, I'm a big fan of things that work. And I could see clearly that wasn't working. And it wasn't a question of empathy at the time. It wasn't a question of empathy as much. It was a little bit more like my ability to teach something I knew how to do intrinsically. I just needed to learn how to teach it. But then over time, once I was really doing coaching a lot, then you just encounter all different personalities. And a lot of the personalities I encountered they needed more of that other side of like now that we're talking about it, I've never really thought about this. Now that we're talking about it, a lot of them are experiencing things that I never experienced, because certain things about the way I set up my business were super natural for me. It was like I wouldn't know how to do it any other way. But those qualities, um, it's not that they don't exist in other people, but maybe they're underdeveloped, or they don't see them as useful, or something like that. So the empathy part was kind of probably that contributes to my empathy being sort of low, because it wasn't a struggle for me. I was like, this just seems obvious. I'll do it like this. And as I learned how to teach it, and then beyond teaching it, learning how to get people to act on it and actually transform, it required a much more nuanced approach. And I wouldn't say I have it down to a science or anything like that, but I certainly noticed, to answer your question, I noticed that it was important for me to be, I don't want to say less direct, but maybe less cut and dry, less just do this,
Yeah.
and a little bit more like, wait, the person's not ready mentally.
Yeah.
Their worldview is not quite there yet. I don't want to say they're not ready, but certainly their mindset can
Yeah.
be, and you can't just turn that on a dime. Mindset is like losing 30 pounds. It takes, reps. You got to really work on it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's
Yeah.
sort of
So,
fascinating to think about.
yeah. So like, let's kind of, again, and I want to do this kind of for everybody listening, because they're probably
Mm,
thinking some of the same things. Like, how do I express empathy when maybe I'm not an empathetic person
right.
as much, or like the way that the people I like to work with? So you bring up a couple different things here. The first is, one, what you're already doing a good job of is saying, I am a guide for this type of person. So let's take it into the story realm. If Luke Skywalker wants to find a girlfriend, Yoda is not his guy, right? Like,
Yeah.
he is not, Yoda is not an expert in that space. The only reason he exists in Luke's story is because Luke wants to become a Jedi. So the first principle of this, of becoming a good guide, is you recognizing, hey, if somebody needs a bit more hand holding, I'm not their Yoda. They actually belong, and I'm actually going to tell them to go somewhere else. That's actually a really strong guide.
Mm,
So that first principle of, like, when you're a consultant, when you are an entrepreneur, when you're a coach, going like, actually, no, this is my lane. This is what I'm good at. That's what a confident guide does, is they don't shrink in their authority, but they also don't try to step into places that they know they're not going to serve people. Because
right.
then you actually become a villain a little bit,
Right.
because like,
Yes.
this is about me and about my pain, but that may hurt this person, but I'm going to take the money. Now you're a villain.
Hmm.
So that's the first principle, is understand your role, what type of guide you are. The second piece is, there's a couple of things that jumped out at me as you were telling your story, which is, one, you found that, as you were you mentioned at one point, you tried other things, but you wanted to get results.
Yep.
Like, so even when you were working with other people, it was more about results than it was about like just hand holding. And so that is a little bit of the type of person that you're looking for, somebody who wants to get down and dirty and not just have a support in their process, but actually take very clear steps to get results. Now, when you articulate that, that really shows what type of guide you are. That is actually empathy. When you're saying, I went through this and I realized that wasn't for me, and so I changed and began to get into more some systematic, like, do this and you can grow your business. That's empathy. Because I think a lot of people mistake empathy for sympathy. Brene Brown kind of separates, one of the examples she gives is that sympathy is seeing somebody down in a well and going, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Empathy is getting in the well with them. I am like you. We are together. So it's not like, going, oh my gosh, I feel so sorry for you, or I'm going to coddle you. It is, in a marketing perspective, it's saying, I am like you. So the more clear you, Jonathan, can say, I went through this before. I built a business on my own. I had coaching, and a lot of that coaching was like just kind of hand holding. And I realized what really worked for me, and what I began to realize working with my clients, was some really clear steps and actionable things people could take to move the needle quickly. So I don't, I'm not the kind, you can even say, I'm not the kind of person who is going to give you a lot of hugs and back pats, because
Right.
actually what I've discovered is that doesn't work as well for me. And it doesn't work as well for my clients.
Right.
Even saying it like that is empathy, because the right person is going to go, that's what I need.
Right.
I am like Jonathan and I need that story. So it's for anybody, when you're thinking through, anybody listening and you're going, okay, how do I express empathy and authority? You're looking at your own backstory and finding the frustrations that you experience that your clients are currently experienced. So if you struggled to grow a business, you can say, when I started out, I struggled to own a business. Or if you're a parent who has a hard time in the beginning balancing work and family, you can say, it took me a long time to find the balance between work and family. You can speak to it as a past struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Then that's empathy. And then you change it and you talk about how you discovered or how you found or you became an expert in fixing that problem, giving evidence. Now I've actually helped hundreds of other dads balance work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
That's authority. So it's actually two very quick statements that position you as a guide in the mind of the people you serve.
Mm.
Empathy, I was like you. I struggled with the same things, but I found a way. And here's some proof that I've done it moving forward.
Mm. Okay. So yeah, if you can boil it down that concisely, that seems like something that could be communicated more easily than, say, like having an hour-long conversation on a podcast and someone like stumbling across like, oh, that's the kind of coaching I'm looking for.
Yep.
What do you think? So I think it's Seth Godin that says, like, there are male doctors that deliver babies. Like, you don't have to have gone through the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, some things that that people struggle with were just, I was a total natural, like, it's just, I don't even understand. At first was surprised that people had certain challenges that were actual blockers, because I was like, oh, wow, that's a thing. So I think over time, I don't even know how many people have coached, hundreds. So it's almost like I can understand what people are going through, even though I didn't go through it, because I've worked with so many people and there are so many similarities. Maybe it's just I'm attracting a particular kind of person. So they have, or maybe it's just normal human stuff for people that do this kind of work, or maybe it's just normal human stuff that I'm just like encountering for the first time as a coach. So what about that? What about, the Yoda that was just born with powers and didn't have to struggle with, running through the jungle?
Well, I mean, there's two different things about this. Is the first is, I work with people ask me all the time, like, have you worked with this type? Like, I was just with a hospital group, a healthcare group up in Ohio, and their big thing was, before they hired me, have you worked with other hospitals?
Right, that's classic.
And
right.
What I actually want to say is, it's actually a benefit for you if I don't, because now I'm not going to steal any of their language, and I'm coming in to help you find clarity. So I'm not already in that world. I'm not speaking your language. I'm helping you communicate in a clear way.
Right.
So there are some times where I, again, lean into my authority of, I've been doing this for a long time and I've worked with huge companies. Mm-hmm. And the temptation in that moment would be to diminish my own. I start to get, embarrassed of like, well, I haven't worked with many companies. And it's like, that doesn't serve them well. I'm not going to puff it up in a way that like is lying or anything, but that's the truth. The truth is, you don't want me to have worked with your competitors, because now I know what they're saying. I know what you're saying. Like, we want fresh marketing for you. But so sometimes I think people put a little bit too much emphasis on that. But the truthful answer is, what you're looking for is not necessarily like, oh, you, let's say you adopted kids and I've never adopted kids. Well, my goal is to find the common ground of that we both have kids. Like, so it's kind of like just in that space, or it's really like, if, you're saying, like you haven't gone through everything that the people have gone through.
Right.
Well, the reality is, though, you can focus on specific problems that they're experiencing that you have gone through.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
So you might not you might not have struggled with the same exact problems, but if you can't help them with problems they're experiencing, they shouldn't be paying you.
Yeah, that would be
So you're
malpractice.
still looking for that common thread of the problem. But
Mm-hmm.
the reality is, like when I go into, so this would be another thing for anybody who is, going out there and speaking on stages or podcasts or anything. If I go to a conference and I'm speaking on a stage, I do not have them I do not introduce myself. I always have somebody else introduce me. So they're giving me authority that I don't have to talk about. So they go, oh, he's done this, he's done this. Then I get up on stage, and the very first thing that I say is, we're all here because we want to grow our business. That's a very broad statement, but what it does in that moment is it gets everybody to nod their head. Right? I'm just like, I'm establishing why we're all here. So the story I'm about to tell matters because you want to grow your business.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing that I say is, here's the problem. Most people in this room are wasting thousands of dollars on marketing because they're telling the wrong story and they don't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you are a banker, a coach, a consultant, you sell shoes, it doesn't matter. In that moment, I have addressed a problem that they have. And what that does is it begins to position me with some empathy right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
So I am inviting them into a very specific story. Now, the other thing I could say is how many, if I'm in a room full of parents, I would say, I get up on stage and go, we're all here because we want to be great parents, right? Just like immediately. Right? And then I would say, here's the problem, is that no matter how, great we are at this, we all get tired, we all get exhausted. And there's a moment where we're going to yell at our kids. And then what happens? Right. So I don't ever give that speech, but I just can and go, what is the problem everybody in this room is experiencing that we have in common? And I can then say, yeah, right after that, all I have to say is, I get it. I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
But, and then you move into authority. Like if I'm in the marketing space, I go, I get it. When I first started out, I would stare at a website and go, what the heck am I supposed to write? Then I would say, but over the past 10 years, I've worked with thousands of companies all over the world and helped them clarify their message and grow their business.
Mm.
Now we're in. That's the first 30 seconds of my talk. I talk about their problem that they're experiencing. It begins to position me with some empathy. I just have to say, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I drop a little bit of authority and we're off to the races.
Mm.
Other than that, nobody on that stage or in that room knows my marital status, my religious or political preference.
Right.
Nobody knows how many kids I have because none of that matters to their story. All I have to do is show up with empathy and authority for what they're there to hear me talk about.
Right. Yeah. And so at a certain level, just being able to articulate their pain/problem in a way that's maybe clearer than they could even on their own. I've always found that naming someone's problem, it almost forces them to believe that you must have the solution. If you can so clearly articulate the problem better than even I could, then you probably have some kind of answer because you've clearly thought about it more. I guess that's the implication.
Yep, it is. Well, and what it is in narrative structure, what you're really doing is controlling the narrative. Because they're in there and they're starting to think about all these different things. They've got all this different stuff on their mind.
Right.
And you are trying to position yourself as somebody who they're going to pay money to or listen to. Mm-hmm. And you have to control the narrative. So the way you control a narrative is by introducing a problem. In a movie or a book, if the main character doesn't encounter any problems in that movie, it's a very boring movie. Like they're just walking around shopping the whole time. It's very artistic, but it's very boring. Mm-hmm. It's the same principle when you're positioning yourself in marketing as a guide, is that if you can posit a problem, or you can say, even if you just walk up to somebody and say, most people struggle with, just that alone makes people, if they struggle with it, wake up and pay attention.
Yeah.
Then you bring your own empathy and authority in, and you're the guide. Now, why, so we kind of have been talking about this guide piece and kind of going back to, again, like the Badass Softie and some of the principles of it, is the idea that I think when you truly understand what it means to be a guide for people, it allows you, I believe, to live more in your own strengths versus trying to be somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm trying to be Luke Skywalker's guide, I have to fake it. I have to try to become Yoda. I have to try to become something else. And so now I'm insecure. I'm not serving them well. I'm trying to puff myself up in a way that doesn't feel natural.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can actually understand where my empathy and authority lies and what problems the people that I'm trying to serve are really experiencing, and if I can help them or not, it makes it much more easy for me to live in my own lane versus trying to be something I'm not. And there are people who want me sometimes to be something I'm not. And if I actually am a guide, I go, nope, I'm the strongest character in this story. And I'm not going to live in this story over here. I'll point them to somebody else. They can go find somebody else. That's fantastic. I'm not going to be an ass about it, but I'm also going to just like lean into my own strengths and go, oh, I don't have to be like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to be like Seth Godin. I don't
Right.
have to be like, and I can learn a great amount of things from Seth, but I am not Seth, and I'm not going to do things like Seth. I'm definitely not Gary Vee. Like Gary
Right.
Vee and I have very different personalities.
Right.
He's so successful, and I've learned so much from him. But if I go, oh, that's the way to be a guide, I'm going to fail because I am not Gary Vee and I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to be. And when I've tried to be, I don't feel good. So
Yeah.
it's that I think when you can really understand who you are and show up with the fullness of both, like don't diminish your authority, but also don't diminish if you are that person who is sensitive, show up as your sensitive self. If you're not that sensitive person, don't show up as your sensitive self. Show up with who you are supposed to be and allow yourself to be that whenever you are marketing and when you're doing business.
So how do you think this kind of idea of as you were talking, I was kind of picturing as like, a little kid wearing their dad's suit or so, it just like doesn't fit,
Yeah.
even if it did fit, it doesn't fit, it's like, it's just something, they're not wearing it right. Something's wrong about it.
Yeah.
To what extent does this, let's call it a tendency to kind of cosplay as Gary Vee or whoever you think you need to be a success? To what extent does that overlap or create imposter syndrome, or is that just a lack of, or is imposter syndrome more from just like a legitimate lack of experience or true authority? You know what I mean? Like you really don't know what you're doing.
I think there is a combination of that, to be honest. Like, because I used to do improv comedy and I used to do, and so I was friends with a lot of stand-ups and I toured and did some things. And the reality is like when you're a young comic, you don't have your own voice yet and you mimic other comics. So it's like, oh, I want to be like Jim Gaffigan. So you
Yeah.
create your cadence like Jim Gaffigan. You tell jokes or stories like Jim Gaffigan. And then you're like, oh, no, I like Nate Bargatze. And you kind of like change a little bit. And the reality is when you're younger, you're borrowing other people's voices. So there
Mm-hmm.
is a sense of like, I think when you're just getting started out, like you can be like Gary Vee if you want to, because you're going to kind of, and then you start to develop. So there's a certain level of maturity that I think has to come
Mm-hmm.
where you do discover, who am I? What
Right.
actually does work for me? And until then, I think you will feel a little bit of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
But my thing would be like, just be honest with that. Don't try to hide it. Don't try to like, when you don't have the answers, don't make them up. Learn, be curious, continue to grow, and be honest with the people you're working with.
Mm.
So I think that's one piece. And then the other piece is like that when you do begin to discover that voice, it really, a true guide, like a true guide doesn't shrink in their authority in a story.
Yeah.
Right?
You mentioned that a couple of times. Let's drill into that. What do you mean shrink in their authority? What is that concretely?
Like you will never hear Yoda like Luke go back and go, I don't think we should do it this way. And Luke goes, I think you're right. Or like Frodo going to Mordor to put the ring in the fire. You don't hear Gandalf go, you know what, maybe we should give up. Like they don't ever shrink. Like
I see.
they stand and they go, no, I've told you what you're supposed to do. if you follow what I do, you're going to win. And they don't go, let's change it because you're smarter than I am. They just like, so they don't
Right.
train. So what I mean by that is like, there was an experience where a company hired me to come in, and what they did is they purchase other companies and then that are growing. So they're successful growing companies that are, say, at like 10 million and have the potential to go to 100 million. And then what they do is they kind of headhunt really high level executives to come in and run those companies, and they give them a portion of the profits when they're sold. And when I say like high level, I'm talking like vice president of Disney, founder of Shutterfly, president, CEO of Xerox, like huge companies. So I walk into this room, and the first person, who was a former vice president of Disney, I'm there the night before, and I run into him in the hallway as the people are kind of walking me around, showing where everything is. And he comes up to me and he says, well, I know what Story is all about. I studied Story, and he goes, it's kind of funny. I hope to learn something tomorrow, but this is the most expensive room you're ever going to be in. And I was like, oh, well, no, I hope you learned something too. Kind of like that. Well, then the next person I walked up to said, oh, I built my company on Story. I understand Story in and out, so I 100% get it. And he even said, I have a couple calls, so if you see me going in and out of the workshop, don't worry about it. And I was like, okay, next person, pretty much the same thing. Like, I've studied Story my whole life. We'll see what you can do. And then as the next mornings, and there's only like 30 people in this room. It's not a huge room. Like it is very, it's at this incredibly like pink and gold hotel where there's like peacocks in the lobby. I mean, it's like over the top. And as they're getting ready to introduce me, they're introducing the morning, and they're getting ready to introduce me. The person who hired me comes over to me and says, we've spent a lot of money on this. I need you to do really well.
No pressure.
So I'm in a room with people who have been in business longer than me, who have seen more success than me, who are really outshining me. They've made way more money than I have in my life. And there's, in this guy's voice, a lot on the line. I start shaking in that moment. And I don't shake, but I started shaking, and they hand me the microphone, and I can't control my hand. Well, the first thing that goes through my head is I remembered Carson Daly saying he has anxiety attacks. And he said before he goes on camera, he presses his hands together as hard as he can, and it releases some of the energy. So I do that first off. Then second, this is all happening about 10 seconds. They're doing my intro on stage.
Yeah.
I am starting in that moment to shrink, because I'm like, who am I?
Okay.
On here, like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And I have to reframe that in the moment, because if I do that, if I go up there shaking in front of all these people who've just spent a lot of money to have me there, and they've spent a lot of money to be there.
Yeah.
That does not serve them for me to walk up insecure and weak in that moment and shrink in who I am and go, hey guys, well, I mean, I know you all know Story, but like, I hope you can learn something. No, like that's what's that going to do?
Yeah.
Now, I don't need to be arrogant, and I don't need to be a jerk about it, but I do need to be strong. Yeah. And I also had to reframe in my own brain two things. One, my job is I am delivering this gift to them, and they get to choose to accept it or not. So that's not on me. I've studied this for 20 years. I got my PhD in it. I've worked with huge companies. This is something that is a gift to them. They get to choose to receive it or not. So first off, that was the first thing. The second thing is that in this space that I'm about to deliver, I am the smartest person in the room. I'm not saying I'm the smartest person in the room when it comes to business or anything else, but when it comes to narrative marketing using a StoryBrand framework, there is nobody in that room who's smarter than me about that. And I needed to remind myself to walk into that space in that moment.
Right.
And I was able to walk in, and my hand stopped shaking, and I stood there with confidence, and I delivered a keynote that ended up, many of them ended up hiring me after I'm confident they made millions of dollars off of some of the things we did. They invited me to stay and be in a bigger Q&A after. Like it turned into a really great thing. But if I would have walked up there shaking
Yeah.
because of the words that all those people said, it would not have served me and it would not have served them. But I stepped into my confidence of what I knew. Not you're the smartest businessman here, not you're the most experienced businessman here. But when it came to this piece of the world,
Yeah.
the tiniest piece of the world, I am the best at this. And so I'm going to walk in there with that confidence and without having to say it, but knowing it.
Great. Perfect. Yeah. Perfect story. So what can people do to, I don't want to say, so like getting to that point though. So like for people that can't see the video, your fingers were like, you have this tiny little, fingers are almost touching this teeny little space where you're sure you know the most about that thing. Is that a recommendation to specialize, or is that, because of course it's going to take time to get there for anybody, you said 20 years. But for people who have been doing what they're doing for 10 years, but a lot of people listening have been doing their thing for 10 years, maybe as a generalist, maybe for all different kinds of companies or whatever. But there's probably some thing in most people listening where they are actually like right up there. It might be a very small thing in the whole list of their skills, or maybe it's a combination of two strange things that only they have. How do I don't know if you actually help people find that thing or identify that thing. Certainly you would help them clarify what that thing is. Yes. So what can you say to people who maybe don't feel like they have that little piece of territory carved out as best in the world?
Yeah. I am a big fan of niching down. Big fan of it. I also know that that's incredibly scary. That's very scary because you're going, well, like, what if this audience doesn't find me and doesn't hear me? But to be just really a clear example is if I said, I help people with their marketing, or I say, I help chiropractors with their marketing. Every chiropractor who's out there will want to hire the chiropractor marketer versus just the marketer, right?
Yeah.
So if you have access to that space, I think niching down, here's the thing you want to ask yourself: do I have access to this audience? And is the audience, has it reached a ceiling? Right? Like, so I worked with a company in Florida who helped people fix their roofs, and they did it after hurricanes. And then in their region, they literally fixed every single roof that existed. And so they had to change their message because now it's like there was a ceiling on the number of, that market was saturated. So they literally couldn't fix any more roofs. So they'd fix every roof. However, because they said we fix roofs after hurricanes, even though they're a construction company that did everything else, they were able to literally fix every roof in the area.
Yeah. So
the niching down, I think, will get people who, if you have access to that audience and there's available clients, niching helps. So that's what I worked with a guy specifically who helps chiropractors in marketing. And he said, I'm worried that I'm getting too niche. And I said, have you stopped growing? And he's like, no. I said, have you been... do all chiropractors no longer need marketing help? And he's like, oh no, there's thousands and thousands. Yeah. I'm like, no, you're good.
Yeah, you're good.
You're good. So, but you have to have access. Like if me personally pick chiropractors, that's not going to work for me because I don't have access to that group. But yes, I'm a big fan. When you can do that, do it. Mm-hmm. And then you can kind of slowly expand from there.
So let's drill into this a little bit because I'm a huge fan of niching down too. And I don't know what you're going to say about this. So I usually when someone gives an example, it's just like, I do the same thing. You say chiropractors or dentists or like some vertical. I think that's not always the right choice to pick. I mean, approach. A vertical is not always the right approach. It could be a demographic or a psychographic or some other affinity or something that binds this group of people together in some way. How much do you talk about that?
Yes. Yeah, I think it can be demographic, psychographic, or really what it comes down to for me with a lot of people is how do you solve the problem differently than people in your space? So if you are a plumber, there are a million plumbers out there. But oftentimes I will say, well, what makes you different? And they will say, well, the difference is we like actually clean up everything in the house after we're done. So they solve the problem differently than other plumbers. So I was like,
Hmm.
that is actually your niche. It's you are
Ah,
the
okay.
plumbers who leave it better than you found it, your whole house better than you found it. So it might not even be a demographic or a group. It's that within plumbing, this is our niche. We say we do that, and we actually charge more for that, right? Like they can actually maybe charge more. Here's a broader example than that. CarMax, right? CarMax doesn't solve the problem of you buying a car at a good price. In fact, if you go to CarMax, you buy used cars and you will probably pay about $2,000 more than if you found that exact same car on a used car lot in the area. However, CarMax is the most successful car dealership in America by like 2 times, I believe, all their competitors combined. It's kind
Wow.
of insane. And they have grown every year that they've existed. The problem CarMax solves, the niche they solve, is you having to haggle with a car dealer. So prices are set. Their salespeople don't work on a commission. It's the price you get, it's the price you see, and that's it.
Hmm.
So I'm willing to go to CarMax to buy a car and pay $2,000 more because they don't solve the problem of buying a car.
Hmm.
They solve the problem of a niche aspect of buying a car, which is that haggling with the dealer. It's all that. It's kind of, you can do chiropractors, you can do demographics, or you can do a problem within your industry that you focus on that other people don't.
Okay, so that's I'm glad I asked because it's not exactly how I use the word. I kind of have different words for all of those different things. Maybe I'm overcomplicating it, but that could hopefully that's very helpful to people because it's one of those words like strategy and value, and there's a lot of words that we need to use a lot, but they're really poorly understood
Yeah.
and they're used differently by different people. And niche, a lot of times, niche, whatever, when people use it, a lot of people I talk to, they immediately think I mean focus just on chiropractors and not on marketing small businesses. Even it's just chiropractors, and I have a broader definition of it. You have an even broader definition of it. So that's probably so for folks listening. When someone gives you the advice to niche down, you should probably find out exactly what they mean, like get some examples because they might be using the term a little bit differently than me or someone else.
And really what it comes down to in that when you're talking about marketing messaging is your differentiation.
Yes.
Your differentiation may be who the group of people you work with, the type of people, the demographic of people, or the problem you solve.
Mm-hmm.
But for the individual, me as a business owner, what I'm really looking for is my differentiation, especially with
Yeah.
AI and all the noise that's out there now. Everything sounds the same, everything looks the same. So how do I differentiate? Well, you
Mm-hmm.
differentiate by identifying one of those pieces, one of those niches that you go down on
Mm-hmm.
in order to differentiate in the market.
Mm. So good. Maybe I know we have to wrap up. You probably have 5 other interviews after this. Um, can you? This is a can of worms. So I'm going to
Okay.
ask you to do the impossible, which is give me your hot take on AI since you brought it up. Uh,
Yeah.
for in the sort of solo professional space, so coaches, consultants, but it could be mechanical engineers and lawyers and accountants and those sorts of things. So professional folks with probably no employees, maybe one. Um, how should they be thinking about AI in your opinion? Is it a threat to those sorts of white collar jobs?
I don't believe so because AI cannot have its own point of view. So AI does not have a POV. It has to rely on the point of view that has been given. So if you're expecting it to have its own point of view and give you the best options, all this stuff, then you're not going to use it properly. And I think people who use it in that way are going to fall behind. What you really have to understand is that it's a tool that's like kind of what I would say is in the middle of the process. So you as a owner, as a communicator, need to come in with a very specific point of view, which means you have to understand what is your differentiator, who is your audience, what are the problems you solve ahead of time.
Hmm.
Then you plug that into AI and let AI come up with 5 million different ways of saying it and 5 million different webinars and social media posts and emails and all this stuff. And then your job is to take that and humanize it on the back end. So AI creates content, but you as the human are supposed to curate. And you curate on the front end and on the back end of the
Hmm.
AI process. Because if you're expecting it to curate and have a point of view, it's just going to be louder garbage that's
Yeah.
out there. You get
Yeah.
it
It's
faster
terrible.
and louder. But your job is curate the front end content and what comes out. So AI creates content, humans curate.
Mm.
Now, one other aspect of this too, of just this is a very practical tip as far as like getting information out there and how to remain human. Previously, say the past decade, one of the things that we taught people in marketing was say, here's 5 tips in order to grow your business, or here's 5 mistakes to avoid. Those kind of pieces of information, because they don't actually have a point of view, can be developed. Anybody can get that through AI.
Hmm.
If you shift your mindset to be, here's how I used 5, or here's 5 mistakes I make so you don't have to. So you put it from a human perspective.
Mm.
Now it actually stands out in the market and is more approachable. So because you can't get that from anybody else. Now, here's the secret. Those of us who are in this world, we use AI to create that of give me 5 mistakes people make. And then I turn that and make it my own. But that's the curation piece, right? So AI will not replace you if you maintain that human element, which is the curation ahead or out of, and then also taking that information and making it personal. So,
Mm.
personal stories, personal mistakes, personal ways that you grew business, or personal like examples of people that you've seen that have inspired you. You can get AI to give you those ideas, but you personalize it by changing it from 5 ways to grow your business to
Hmm.
5 ways I've helped people or 5 ways I grew business. Make it about you, and now you can't be replaced by a computer.
Mm. It's fascinating. I mean, story is going to be maybe more important than ever.
I agree. I think so. I
Hmm.
genuinely believe, because we can now see it. I mean, especially the younger generations, they can spot AI like that. My 8-year-old can spot AI like
Yeah.
that.
Right.
And so you have to figure out how to bring in that human element to it, or you won't. You'll get lost in the fray as well.
Yep. Well, that is a perfect place to leave it. So thanks so much for joining me and sharing all this great information with the audience.
Oh, this is fun. This is a lot of fun.
Cool. Well, where can people go to subscribe to the new podcast and check out everything else that you're doing these days?
Yeah, so Badass Softie is on all the all the platforms: Apple, Spotify, YouTube. And for people who are interested, maybe like kind of doing this for themselves and going through the process of figuring out your own message and your own clarity, you can go to drjjpeterson.com. So drjjpeterson.com. And I have a company called Conscious Brand Agency. So we help people kind of walk through this process of creating their message, create marketing for their message, or even like if you don't have products around your thought leadership, I help people create that as well.
Perfect. That's fantastic. I urge people to check out the podcast. Thanks again for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that's it for. Let me remember how to do my own show. All right, folks, that's it for this week. My name is Jonathan Stark, and I hope you join me again next time on Ditching Hourly. Bye. Haven't done that in a while.